thank you for joining us for this episode of The State of Leadership, Simple and Beyond. That is Robert Hilliard. I am Whitnie Wiley, and that means this must be Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Pacific, and we are here to talk with you about all things leadership. And today we are continuing our discussion about decisions and decision making. Last week, we started in part one of this four-part series talking about what decision making is and why it's important. You can go back and watch that episode. I will put the link in the post here. You can find it on YouTube. You can find it here on LinkedIn. On my page, I believe Robert has it on his page as well. And you can also find it in the Dream Job and Career Connection Facebook group on Facebook, which is a little obvious since it's a Facebook group, right? So there are a number of places for you to catch that, and we would recommend that for your viewing pleasure and education. But today we are going to be shifting, and we're going to be talking about a couple of different decision-making frameworks or strategies or methods that you can use to help you make better decisions. And the reason that it's important for you to make better decisions, just briefly without going into all of last week, is that it helps you with problem solving, right? It helps you with your team. And so as we talk about the different strategies that are available, and we're not going to talk about every strategy under the sun. Robert has his favorites. I have a couple of my favorites. We'll talk about those. There will be others. I will mention a couple of others by name. We won't go into them in detail, but they are out there and available for you. So, and I'm just curious, Robert, with your opening, are the ones that you're bringing up, are they ones that you actually use?
Oh, that's a really good question. Yes, for the most part. One of them I definitely use. The other, I don't use that unless I am with a group.
Okay.
Talk about that. One of them you can use. You can probably use both. You can use both of them, by yourself. Making your decisions. But I like to use one of them for both, and one particularly for groups or teams.
Okay. Any opening thoughts about strategies in general or frameworks before we dive into the ones that we are going to talk about today?
Yeah, consider the environment and the context. So the ones that I'm going to talk about come from the VUCA, the VUCA of it all, and we'll talk about what VUCA is. But there are other strategies that you can employ when things are stable, and that's a little hint there. VUCA means that things are not as stable as they typically are. So you may have some that you like to employ when things are predictable. Certainly use those, but when things are unpredictable, you may want to take a look at some VUCA strategies for making decisions.
I like it. The other reason, and we talked about this last week a little bit, is that a lot of the decisions that we make are on autopilot.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And what we're talking about is not your autopilot decisions, right? But I think you need to take a step back and really think about those things that should be on autopilot and be intentional about, I'm putting these on autopilot and here's the reason why, right? Mm-hmm. And being conscious and mindful about what you're doing, and not just do it out of habit, but making sure that if you are doing your decision making on autopilot, that it is actually the best thing for you, best thing for your team. And the way to do that is every now and then you have to take a step back and ask the question, is this still the best way for me to make these decisions and take these actions? And so you may find again that yes, this is the best way to move forward, or I need to take a step back and do this a different way. And it's okay. The bottom line is that you want to be intentional, particularly with teams. As the members of your team change, the way you make decisions, or the decisions that you make that affect that team, maybe they need to change because the personalities and the dynamics of that team have changed. And what you were doing before no longer really works for what you have in place now. So it's important to stay on top of what you're doing, why you're doing it, how you're making the decisions about what you're doing, so that you're always shooting for optimal, right? There's no perfect, but there is optimal. And optimal, as Robert mentioned, shifts with the circumstances. What's optimal today may not be optimal a year from now, or 4 years from now, or whenever.
Yeah, and I like to think about it when you're talking about being on autopilot. The thing that comes up for me is looking at the stakes that are involved. If the stakes are low, go on. You certainly keep it autopilot. You don't want to be. Look, if having the same thing to wear every day is going to save you half an hour, that's a low stakes decision to make, right? You could say, okay, I can do that. But if it's a high stakes decision, you certainly don't want to be in autopilot, because that's when you can run into trouble, because things beyond your control are changing a whole lot faster than they used to change.
And the other thing that I will mention as we get into specific frameworks are your biases, your prejudices that are inherent in sort of the way you approach things. And whether or not, just taking a step back to make sure that they are not hindering you from making best or optimal decisions for the circumstances under which you find yourself. So let's go ahead. I think Robert has 2 strategies. I have 2. So Robert, why don't you go first, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. And I've taken these from, like I said, some strategies that people use when they are in environments that are experiencing VUCA, right? Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And the first one is getting multiple perspectives. It's really about getting as much information as you can so that you can make a decision that's going to be optimal, like Whitney says, for the situation at hand. And of course, when you get multiple perspectives, people are going to start queuing into things. They may be piggybacking off of something that you said. They may actually see holes in a decision or a direction that you want to go in. They may have a completely different take on things, or fresh eyes, or a fresh perspective that you didn't even think existed. So that's really important, getting as many people as you can tolerate involved in that decision, so you get as much information as you can and make a decision that's going to be good for you, your team, or your organization. Because as we always say, there are many factors putting pressure on your situation external to where you are. And the more eyes you have on that, the broader your palette is going to be, and the better your decision making is going to be as well.
I like that. I like that. And I'm a big proponent of, an advocate of getting perspectives from other people, right? Again, that goes to the comment I just made about biases and prejudices, right? And sometimes we get in the habit of making the decisions that we make the way we make them because of the way we think, the mental models. Robert talked about that last week. And having other people bring in their perspectives, right? Bring in information that you hadn't considered can go a long way in helping you to counteract that.
Okay. The second one is being flexible with your destination. So choosing a direction as opposed to a destination, knowing that especially now that things are changing. Someone said to me, not only are things changing faster than ever before, different things are changing faster than ever before. So that destination that you set that may take your organization a year to get to may not even be there anymore. So certainly you want to have a little more flexibility with your destination, choosing a direction, moving in that direction, and then making adjustments as you go based on what's happening in the environment outside of your organization, outside of your bubble, if you will, that bubble that you're in. And one of the things I like to do with this is combine them. If you can combine them, choosing that direction with the multiple perspectives of other people, again, it's enriching your decision-making power.
So, I hear what you're saying, and I'm probably 90 something percent agreement with you. The flexibility part, absolutely. The direction part, without a doubt. I do think, and I think I still hear you saying, particularly the last little bit you said, the caveat is having a destination is fine, but being willing to adjust that as circumstances dictate, as things that come along would suggest that maybe, again, going with optimal, that is not the optimal place for you to land in the end. And so, if that's where we are, then I agree with you 100%. The way you started that, I was more like 90%, 92, maybe 92%. But I think when I share mine, I think we're saying the same things. We're getting to the same place. Again, it is about paying. This is why it matters that you're mindful about what's going on, that you're paying attention, that you are, not for high stakes matters. You are not operating those on autopilot or without giving it any thought or running off your mental models, rather than really paying attention to what's going on, because you could end up with some challenges in doing that. And after I share mine, we're going to run through a very simple scenario, and we'll apply each of the approaches to that scenario, and so that you can see how you can actually apply them. And it's going to be super simple so that you'll be able to follow what we're saying, but you can apply each of these to complex situations, simple situations. Most of what we're going to say can be done with groups or can be done alone. So just know that those are available to you as well. So the place I'm going to start is just sort of laying it all out there. It's the decision tree or a logic tree model. And it is simply sort of specifying what the problem is, making sure so that you're making sure that you are solving the right problem, right? And a lot of times we're presented with a challenge or a problem and a potential problem, and we haven't really determined that what's been presented to us is actually the problem that needs solving, or the thing that needs a decision to be made about, right? So you need to decide what it is you need to know and how important it is. And the way I think of this, and this is one of the approaches that I use quite frequently, right, is identify all the possible solutions, even those that may not necessarily seem realistic, right? And be willing to be outside the box. So this is sort of a brainstorming approach. again, by yourself or in a group, right? You're looking for all the possible solutions. And when I say all the possible solutions, I don't mean an infinite number in that you do it to the exclusion of actually getting to a result. But look at all the possible solutions, even those, again, that may not seem like they're realistic at the beginning. And then consider each option carefully, identifying the supporting ideas and the contradictory ideas that go along with that. And what you're going to want to do with the logic tree or a decision tree approach is ultimately like lay out a visual of all the information that you gather, right? And so you'll have, here are the potential solutions, and then you'll go through what's the supporting idea on why we would want to do this, and what's the contradictory. Basically, you're looking at the pros and cons, right? Why this is a good idea, why it's not a good idea, and exploring that for each of the solutions. The reason that this is a good approach is that it allows you to thoroughly investigate what's available. And then seeing it visually, right? A lot of times we're bogged down with the information and the minutia in our head, and we can't find our way through that. But maybe seeing it laid out on a whiteboard or with post-it notes or in a notebook, maybe that can help you. The other pro of this is that it lets you generate lots of ideas and think outside the box. A reason that you might not want to use this approach is that you could get bogged down in lots of irrelevant information, right? And that your biases, emotional biases, may get in the way of how you're collecting data or the data that you're collecting, because you're doing it based on your preconceived notions about what's a right way to go. And then finally, it may not actually help you get to an answer. You've got all these options out there, and then you still have to make a decision. But it helps you to get more clarity about what your decision is about, and then you can analyze the information that you get to ultimately make a decision. Any thoughts on that?
No, it sounds great. It sounds great. It's not something that I've used. I've heard about it before, but I haven't used it. But it sounds like it's a great way to see visually the different directions that you can go to and the different decisions that you can make.
I don't tend to, unless it's really complicated, like pull up a whiteboard. I don't pull up a whiteboard or chalkboard, but I do use a pen and paper, and I just lay things out. And here are the reasons that this makes sense. Here are the challenges that come along with that. And then I can look at it and go, okay, I'm going to go with, I'll pick one, and then, trust that that's a good one because I've given it some thought. Right. And I
Right.
think that's the piece that helps us. It does take a little time. So this is one of those the approaches where the more you do it, the more quickly you'll be able to do it. The other one that I use a lot, and it doesn't have a visual component, but I'm going to say it probably isn't that far off of the decision tree, and it's called WRAP. It's the WRAP framework, and WRAP is an acronym for Widened Frames, Reality Test Assumptions, right? You're going to test your assumptions about what's really going on. Detachment, attain detachment, and prepare for failure. And the way this works is that the W for widened frames is that you're not going to actually focus on the problem, and you're going to attempt to go beyond the problem to see, one, if it really is a problem you're trying to approach. And that's not all that different from the decision tree, right? You want to make sure that what you're working on needs a decision, right? If you're going to spend your time making a decision, you want to make sure you are addressing the thing that actually needs the decision and not be taken down a path that isn't uh, what the issue is. And then the reality, you're going to test the assumptions, right? Reality test assumptions. And this is take one potential solution and imagine how it actually plays out. Imagine how it works in the future. Consider the things that can go wrong, list the negative assumptions that you have to get a sense of where things stand. You want to actually get a feel for what the reality is of the situation. The detachment piece, attaining detachment, it says A for attain detachment. You know, when you make, what do you, what I just said the word. What's the, oh my God.
It'll come to you. It'll come to you.
The word wrap. What is it? Your VUCA.
VUCA, right.
No, what is it? The harder I'm trying, the more the word is.
And you're knocking it out of my head. So what you're talking
An acronym. It's an acronym. An
Yeah.
acronym.
Yes.
So the acronym, I had this aside, right? Which is when you're creating acronyms, sometimes you do a lot of verbal mental gymnastics in order to get an acronym that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right. So really this is about detachment, but in order to have it say wrap, you had to say attain detachment. So anyway, detachment. And detachment is about removing yourself from the process, right? And not being committed to any particular path, the sort of the flexibility that you talked about earlier. I'm not committed to any particular way that this needs to happen. I'm flexible about it and therefore detached from sort of the outcome or the eventual destination, right? Going back to your example, I'm detached from that because I'm looking for what's most optimal. And one of the ways you can do that, or a couple of ways that you can do that, one is to consider, if this is a personal situation, what would a friend do? A friend that you respect, a friend that makes good decisions. What would that person do? Right? Or your imaginary, what would someone who makes good decisions do? And then if it's a business situation, what would a colleague do? A respected colleague, what would they do in the same situation? So this allows you to detach from whatever emotions and biases you may have and look at it from a more objective perspective. And then the P is to prepare for failure. And what you want to do is imagine that you failed, that you didn't get where you were going. What would you do? How would you fix it? How could you mitigate the consequences that come about from the failure, or when you pull out, when you back out, so that you can actually get back on track? And so, again, this wrap is widen the frames, reality test assumptions, attain detachment, and prepare for failure. Why would you want to use this approach? It broadens horizons to find potentially better solutions. And ultimately, again, that's what we're talking about. How can you make better decisions, right? How can you be a better decision maker? One of them is to expand yourself for finding solutions that you wouldn't ordinarily come up with on your own, or that you could come up with a team. You want to be able to find new uncommon solutions, if that makes sense. It helps you to make decisions easier when you know how to mitigate the consequences and how others might solve a similar situation or a similar problem. Why would you want to use this? a lack of structure, right, that leads to one option. And so if you know that the lack of structure is a challenge for you, this again, maybe this isn't the best approach. It extends brainstorming with lots of options that might be difficult to compare. So again, this is something that you need to know about yourself or your team if you are going to look to use this approach. And it validates options, but it doesn't ultimately help you with the final decision. So you've got the information, you got the data that you need. You still have to make the decision. And in the end, are you going to be able to do that? And it could be time consuming. So those are the couple that I wanted to talk about in some detail. A couple of others that have presented themselves to me over time in terms of groups that I've been a part of is the OODA loop. It's about observing, right? Being aware of your environment. Robert talked about this in the beginning. Being aware of your environment, taking in the facts around you, orienting yourself in view, orienting the problem in view of you, who you are, your personality, what you do, and how you go about doing it, deciding, and then taking action. And then the final one I'll just mention, you can look these up, is grow. I believe we learned this one in change management class. It's goals, reality, options or obstacles, and will, right?
Yeah,
So
that's coaching.
coaching, this is a coaching model, is
Yep.
not for like making quick
Mhm.
decision making.
Mhm.
It's not for quick decision making, but it helps you work through the issues. And so the G for goals is being clear about what it is you're doing, the end goal that you're seeking. What is your current reality? Reality for R. Where are you right now? Right? Where are you right now? What are you working with? What are the tools, the resources, all of that that is available to you right now? Analyzing the current options and the obstacles. This is something that is huge for me personally in my decision making, is the assessing the landscape, right, and being aware not only of where I am and where I want to go, but what are the things that are between here and there, right, so that I can make decisions about what may come up and what I have available, resources, the tools, the resources, excuse me, that are available to me that I may need to use in order to move towards where I'm trying to go. And then W, whether or not you have the will. And that means choosing the most promising option with the obstacles that you can actually overcome. So those are my models for decision making. In reality, I asked you this question whether or not yours were one that you use. I do. And the other thing you said that I thought was important is taking pieces from different ones ultimately to help make the decision. And again, if you are mindful, if you are present in your situation, all right, the flexibility piece of this, I'm going to take this piece from this model and this from another model. You can find an approach that will work for you.
Yeah, and what I'm going to add to that is, if 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 nothing else, one of the things that I employ with nearly every client, well, certainly every client that's making a decision, is something that is called I call it a, well, I don't call it that. It's called a flat tire drill. right? If you were teaching your, kid, niece, nephew how to drive a car, that lesson isn't over until you teach them how to change a flat tire. You don't want to wait until you have a flat tire. You don't want to wait until they have a flat tire for them to learn how to change a tire. It's not going to work well. So it's that, okay, what could go wrong? You have this plan, what could go wrong? What would you do if that happened? And when I work with clients, I don't just stop there and go, what else could go wrong? What would you do if that happens, right? So you start to build out this, you have this, okay, here's the plan. But if things go wrong, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. And when you enter into your decision, you have a lot more confidence. You're not being tentative because you know that, hey, look, I've prepared for a lot of things. And one of the things that I love to do personally for myself and with my clients, okay, you went through that. Ask some of your friends and colleagues what else if you feel comfortable sharing your plan with them, what else could go wrong, and start thinking about other contingency plans. And so you have this, like I said, I like to call it a palette. You have a whole bunch of different things that you can, grab, or tools that you can grab and start using if things do go wrong. And they will.
That part is very true.
They
Life happens, flat tires happen. So absolutely, which goes to our simple scenario. So Robert's in New York. I am in Sacramento, California. And let's just say, for example, that we wanted to have a business meeting, and I'm like, Robert, come to Sacramento. And Robert's like, Whitney, come to New York. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not coming to New York. New York smells. I'm not coming to New York. So come to California. I don't know if it does or doesn't. I've never been, but
well, certain parts do, but
big cities tend to do that. So I'm just saying. So let's say that that's the scenario, that Robert's traveling from New York to Sacramento, or I'm traveling from Sacramento to New York, right? In terms of how we're going to get there, very simple scenario, right? How are we going to get there? And let's say in the decision tree model, the things that I would want to take into account, and you can apply this to one of your models, but what I would want to look at is, how am I going to do that? Right? There are lots of different modes of transportation that can get me from Sacramento to New York. And I want to explore what those are. And it's not just, or it may not just be the quickest way to get there or the least expensive way to get there. There could be lots of other things that would come into the picture, right? So just off the top of my head, I could go by car, I could fly, I could take a train, I could ride on a motorcycle, catch a ride with somebody, could hitchhike, or catch a ride with someone that I knew was going there, right? Mm-hmm. And so these become this first level of, here are some options that are available to me to get from Sacramento to New York. And then I'm going to start analyzing the pros and cons of each of those, right? Hitchhiking, I don't know, maybe that's fun, but it could be dangerous.
Yeah, I don't think it's fun. Certainly dangerous.
I don't know. I haven't done it.
It can be exciting.
I'm just saying, right? I could drive. I could get in my car, or I could rent a car and drive, right? But driving it's going to take days to get there. And if I drive by myself as opposed to go with someone else, that means I need to stop and rest in the hotels, and right. So something that could take, if I booked a flight that could take me, say, 6 hours, or catch this as hilarity of all hilarity. I'm talking to someone this morning who's booking a trip from California to Kentucky for speaking engagement, and in doing trying to book the flight was from Sacramento to Atlanta,
Mm-hmm.
to Los Angeles,
Mm-hmm.
to Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
Who would do that? Why would one, first of all, why would an airline plan that
I've heard
as
it.
a
I've heard of such things.
and it was like
Bypassing the
23 hours of travel. And it's like, who does that? But, right. So when you think of booking a flight, you think of it sort of as the quickest way from here to there. And that's like, that's a no-go, would be a no-go for me. Right. So, and then you have to think about how much it costs, whether or not you are afraid of flying, all of the things, taking a train, right? You don't have to drive. It takes a long time, but you can see the country, you can interact with people, right? So you're taking into account all these different um, obstacles or opportunities depending on how you choose to see it. And so the decision tree lays these things out. And what becomes ultimately important is, what is it that you're really trying to accomplish? And so let me say this one piece, backing up a half a step. Does the trip even need to happen? Right? So asking the question about whether or not there is a problem to be solved and a decision to be made. Does the trip need to happen? You and I have met in person twice in the 10 years, the almost 10 years that we've known each other. We've been in each other's physical presence twice. We have been doing business and this podcast or webcast and some other things together in the course of that time without being in each other's presence. So the question, do we even need to make the trip? And then if one or the other of us is going to make the trip, what are the other things that we want to get out of the trip? So maybe going by car makes sense because I want to stop in Texas and see a friend and I want to see the countryside, and I've never driven cross country before, right? So there are all sorts of other parameters, variables that could be taken into account in order to make the decision.
I love that, and that's I love the fact that this is so simple. But the great thing about it is it's so simple that when complexity is added, it just throws things completely out of whack. From I don't know where your person was coming from, California to going to Kentucky, and then they threw in extra levels of complexity, and added the probability of uncertainty, volatility, and ambiguity, because the more you travel, the more things can go wrong. And so maybe their thinking was, well, for some odd reason, this is going to save money or something like that, because they'll bring the cost of the flight down and more people will book it. I don't know. I mean, I don't know the logic behind it. I'm struggling to find it. But
airlines are crazy. Yeah. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah. So I'm going to add another layer to this. As far as choosing a direction instead of a destination. I think this will clear up any of your, maybe move you that additional, 6% you need to go, whatever it is. You tell me about a fantastic hotel in Sacramento, and you've been there, you love it, people rave about it, it's gets all the stars, and I am so amped up about coming to visit you because I'm going to be staying in this hotel and I get to partake in all of the amenities and all that stuff, but I can't get there. It's booked up, or it doesn't exist, or there was a flood, or there was some kind of natural disaster. And what do I do? So my direction now it's in the same direction, but my destination is not there anymore. I can go to an adjacent, neighborhood. I can go to, maybe a different, maybe in the same neighborhood, but it's just a different hotel. Yeah. So it's not my original destination, but it's close enough. It's going to solve the problem of being close enough to you so that we can get together and do whatever it is that we put on the docket. that legal term, because I know you appreciate that. Um, but
Thank
but
you.
but I had the flexibility because my destination was no longer viable to me. So it's having that flexibility. Now you will know people that when they have a destination, like say for example, they need to lose 20 pounds, they will not be satisfied until they lose that 20 pounds. It doesn't matter if they have 18 pounds. Their goal was 20. They're going to be dissatisfied until they hit 20. And so instead of saying, well, you know what, I'm satisfied. I'm very close to my goal. And you know what, I can, I still want to hit that goal, but I'm not going to go crazy. I'm not going to start ingesting tapeworms to lose the extra 2 pounds. But is to have that flexibility, or to look and say, okay, well, maybe what I'm doing is not going to get me there because I seem to be at this plateau. Perhaps I need to choose a different approach. So that's what we're talking about, choosing a direction instead of the destination.
I love that. I love that. So we are going to start to wrap this up. I'm going to say this and invite you with your final thoughts. I'm going to check to see if we've got any comments from the audience that anyone wants to share. If you are watching this on replay, we invite you to reach out or leave a comment, and one of us will certainly respond to you. But in the end, again, I think I've said this, I don't know that it matters as much which decision-making process you use. What's important is that you have one or several that are available to you, that you are intentional about making decisions about those things that you have decided that it doesn't serve you if they're on autopilot, right? Those things that you can do habitually on autopilot or without thinking, wearing the same thing every day, if that works for you and it frees your mind and your energy for more important things, absolutely, right? So be intentional and then know that you are making decisions that ultimately you're going to own, right? That's one of those things that as a leader is particularly important. It's not just that you make decisions, that you take action, but you're going to own those. The consequences, the results, they're yours. So you want to make sure that you are all in and how you've made the decision, the pathway, so that you can own those. Right. Find the root cause of what it is you're making decisions about. Know what you want in the end, whether it's a destination or a direction. What do you want? And just throw this simple example out. It is something that often happens for leaders and dictates pathways that they take. Your job is to make sure that the work gets done, right? You want to make sure that the work gets done. The decisions you make affect how that work gets done. So you can use your legitimate authority, boss people around, tell them what to do, micromanage them, or and get the results that come from that, from a team of people who are disgruntled and unhappy and disengaged, right? Yeah, maybe they got the work done, but there are all these other things and they are looking for their opportunity to leave because that's how you lead them. Or in addition to getting the work done, what you want. So when I'm talking about what is it that you want a team that performs well, that's happy, productive, engaged, and gets the work done. The decisions you make that get you one result or the other are not the same decision. right? And again, it depends on the personalities and the dynamics of the people in the team and what you did a year ago to have productive, engaged, happy employees may not be the same decisions and actions that you need to take today. Therefore, you need to be engaged and intentional and on top of what's going on. So, Robert, final thoughts.
My final thought is no matter what decision-making process you use, always build in some time for reflection to see if it's getting you the results that you expect and or want. I'll leave it there.
Which means you need to know what you expect and what you
want.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, and I will say this, that the more you are actively making decisions, the easier and more quickly you'll be able to make decisions while being intentional and engaged in the process. So, next week, we're going to be talking about the obstacles that get in the way of great decision making. And we hope that you will join us then. That will be part 3 of our 4. And we would love to be a resource for you. If you want to learn more about your decision making process and how to improve it, you can book, and I'm going to put this up here. You can book a session. I guess I should have cleared this with you, Robert, before. It's better to ask for
better to ask, was it
for forgiveness and permission, right? That wasn't the intent. But if you want to reach out to Robert and book a session with him, here's his email address: is inspireme@roberthilliardcoaching.com. Inspire me at roberthilliardcoaching.com. You can reach out to him for a session, and he can help you figure out how to be a better decision maker. And he is a super executive coach. If you are in the market for that. And then if you would like to book some time with me, we can do a decision-making assessment. So I've got a decision-making assessment, and we'll do a complimentary strategy session. You can book that with me at shiftingintoaction.now.site. Shiftingintoaction.now.site. Would love to talk with you. And if you have need for organizational development, some strategy, or other help with that, you can reach out to Robert and or I. We would love to talk with you about how we can be of service to you in a consulting capacity. So with that, we want to thank you again for joining us for this episode of The State of Leadership, Simple and Beyond. We are here on Thursdays, 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Pacific. And until next time, make great decisions, and we'll see you again soon. Take care.